Hello everyone, my name is Ishan Avneet and I'm going to be talking about cybersecurity for gateways. If you have any questions or concerns, you can drop me an email at iavneet@iu.edu. Uh, I'm working as a senior security analyst at Indiana University CACR from past 1.5 years. CACR stands for uh, Center for Applied Cybersecurity Research, and I've also been part of SGCI, Justice CI, and Research SOC Group. I'm a recent master graduate from Northeastern University, Boston. Previously, I worked with IBM India Private Limited and Infosys Limited back there in India. I've also worked on multiple SGCI gateway projects like DDS, Cosmic 2, Chem Compute, helping them with their cybersecurity assessments. Our methodology typically involves reviewing the health of the system, its state, the processes it runs, and the security controls it has. So today we'll be talking about cybersecurity for gateways and how to manage cybersecurity risks from operations point of view. Excuse me. We will also be doing a self-evaluated IT security risks exercise. We will also be looking at risks to the science mission, like what are the individual assets a science mission has and what are the threats that this or these assets face. So what are your cybersecurity challenges? Normally, we would do this presentation in person, and this is where we ask what are your cybersecurity challenges are. So please take a moment to think about that. You can pause the video and then think about them and then come back in a few seconds. So some of the examples of stuff that we have heard at Focus Weeks in the past are SSL certificate, phishing attacks, host protection, ransomware, two-factor authentication. So these are some of the common cybersecurity challenges that everyone face. Is cybersecurity a concern for gateways? Cybersecurity is a concern for gateways because mostly it's connected to the internet. I mean, anything that is connected to the internet could have a cybersecurity concern. But specifically with gateways, there is a degree of open access. Since there is an expectation that you would be publishing your results, your scientific findings, and also you might also provide public access to the gateway so that they can go up and sign up for an account. You might not think that the data that you are working is sensitive in nature unless you are working on a medical project that holds medical information which falls under HIPAA. So you need to be HIPAA compliant there. Also, you might think that you are not one of the big organizations like Google's, Facebook's, or Amazon's. So you might think the attacker might not target you because they might not know you. That is also kind of true because some of the gateways out there, they serve very specific need. So there is a good chance that attacker might not know you. You might also think that your hosting provider is taking care of your security like GoDaddy, Amazon, and sometimes security needs can also be taken care of by the organizations that you are working for. For example, here I'm working for India. I'm part of CACR. I'm working for Indiana University. So some of the security needs are taken care of by Indiana University Security Department. So please take a minute and think about what could be the other reasons why you would be dismissive of cybersecurity being an issue for gateway. Or if you could think of any other concern that you would have for gateways. Cybersecurity is a big part of sustainability, which builds on trust, and cybersecurity failures can erode that trust. So, for example, if you are hit by a ransomware, and the systems become unavailable, then your clients would feel less confident to store their data with you. Also, you might not be able to perform your day-to-day tasks or day-to-day operational tasks since your data is locked up. System compromise would require a downtime to fix the problem which affects the availability. In scientific world, a job could be running on supercomputers for months at a time. So a system compromise would mean that a month-long job got cut off at the end due to system compromise, and you lost all the progress that you had made so far. Also, if your gateway's website it gets hacked and it is used to serve malicious content of it, then that would lead to an impact in the reputation, which can lead to your website being put on a bad reputation list, and it can be difficult to get off that list. If you are using Exceed or AWS, you have to abide by certain policies to make sure your host is not misused, as you may end up running huge AWS bills. For example, someone uploads a movie to your website and that movie gets downloaded by, let's say, hundreds of people or thousands of people. That will run up a big bandwidth bill and might burn into your budget. So you need to be careful of that. Password reuse. Password reuse is one of the biggest problems in cybersecurity. People using the same password for multiple things, like using the same password for something important, like their bank account, and then using the same password for something that is not so important, something that is benign. So if one of them gets hacked, it also puts your other account at risk. So you need to be careful about that. And something like this, something like using the same password for multiple accounts, it's not advisable. Some of the example we can give you of gateway compromises are WordPress. WordPress, it gets hacked all the time. People use WordPress plugins to have plugins that have vulnerability, and that vulnerability gets exploited, or you might not have upgraded or updated your WordPress itself, and that can get compromised as well. And so what happens when your Exceed community user account gets compromised, and what that means for your ability to, use Exceed in the future? AWS credentials placed in a GitHub repositories where people have put their secret keys into the source code and uploaded them on the GitHub. So GitHub is constantly scanned and looked at by attackers for all kinds of credentials and stuffs. So you have to be aware that if you have put something in there, it will get compromised sooner or later, which would put your gateways at risk. So again, take a moment to think about others that you may have noticed. Managing the cybersecurity risks. So there's nothing like perfect security, and this is something that we hear all the time. You should not try to chase this imaginary thing as perfect security. You can try and fix all your security holes, protecting your infrastructure from all the places that you can think of possible, but you might still miss one. And an attacker out there just needs to find that one entry point to get in, and they are relentlessly looking for one. So what do? You mitigate some risks and you accept some. For example, in your personal life, you have some risks that you mitigate and you accept some. Take a moment and try to think of something that you mitigate and something that you accept. So an example of a risk that you mitigate is your house catching on fire. For that, you have home insurance. So home insurance is your mitigation. A risk that you would have accepted is something like armed robbery. This is something that you may just accept unless you have a gun and you want to fight back with the robber. Not all controls are technical. For example, documentation. Documenting procedure so that everyone is aware of them and follow them can also be a control. Standard operating procedure documents, or what we call as SOP documents, can always be helpful. They also help in reducing the security risks. For example, policies for onboarding, offboarding employees, new employees, and employees who are going out of your organization. You have a policy for offboarding them. What is the procedure for your backups? What is the procedure if you get hacked? Do you have a incident response policy in place? Procedure for resetting a compromised password? If you have a training and awareness program, if your employees are aware of what two-factor of authentication is, and if you have something like again training and awareness program for phishing attacks, and if you have them, are they working? Are your employees if they get a phishing mail, are they able to tell the IT department that this looks like a phishing mail and this should be looked into, rather than just clicking on the links that is out there in the phishing email? Another thing that you need to consider here is who is going to accept the risk in an organization. Technical team member who could be a programmer, a system admin, who directly works on the gateways might not have the authority to accept risk. In such cases, he or she they need to have a conversation with their manager. And if you are the manager, you might want to have a conversation with your team, your employees, as to who accepts the risk. Here is an example of a control which is policy based, and it is not technical. It's acceptable use policy. It's a good one to have so that you know what you are allowed to do and what you are not allowed to do on your website. For gateways, one of the big potential abuses could be Bitcoin mining and using gateways resources to send out spams. Hence, it is useful to have a acceptable use policy so that users are aware of something. Users are aware that if they are doing something wrong, and if they try to step outside of this policy, they are aware of these things. It should be somewhere in your sign up process so that users have explicitly read the policy and they accept this policy. An example of acceptable use policy that we have created here at Trusted CI is given in the slide. We have a link in there. You can go ahead, you can use this and make modification as per your legal advice from your institute. IT risks self-evaluation worksheet. So this is something that Trusted CI has developed. It is called Cyber Checkup. It is a short-term exercise that we send to engagees that we partnership with, or people who wants to have or start a partnership with us. You can go through this sheet on your own. You can read the detailed description. And so what we are going to do here is you are going to go through this exercise and identify the risk based on accepted, mitigated, working on it, or partially mitigated. It's a self-evaluation sheet that is divided into multiple categories. You have policy and procedures, host protection, network security, physical security, monitoring and logging. Today we'll be looking at one of them, that is host protection, and rest you can go through on your own. So for each of these controls, we are going to write in if we are accepting the risk. For that, we are going to write A. If we have a control in place, well, we are going to put in C. If we are partially mitigating them, we will put P. If we are not mitigating them, we'll put N in there. And put a question mark next to the control if you're not sure of it. So this one is policies and procedure. So this section, you should go through that on your own, policy and procedures. And then you can, in the mitigated column, you can put in if you're mitigating the risk, if you've accepted the risk, if you're working on mitigating them, or if you have not mitigated them at all. Moving on to the next section that we'll go through together. So this is the host protection. So you have, you can see the risk section here in one column, followed by goal and recommended control. So let's go through them. Pointer number 3.1 states that an attacker can get remote access on your system by exploiting a known vulnerability and may also get a privileged access to the resources. So here the goal is to keep the patches up to date and apply them as soon as they become available. Microsoft does something called Patch Tuesday, where a system accumulates all the patches over a period of month and dispatches them on the second Tuesday of every month. So if you are using a Windows system or if you have a Windows server, you should always be looking for Patch Tuesday email or updates from Microsoft and apply them as soon as they become available. Sometimes what happens is you apply patches and it would lead to, it can expose a vulnerability which did not exist previously. So one needs to ensure that the system are secure after applying the patches. Recommended control here is to test the system with vulnerability management tools to ensure that the patches work as expected. Some common vulnerability management tool that you can make use of is Nessus, OpenVAS, Metasploit. You also have others like OSCRP, I guess. Okay. So point number 3.3, procedure to update the system should be consistent as they may lead to a vulnerable system. So do you have tools like Ansible or Puppet to manage your systems and keep their configuration up to date? If you are not using one of these tools, it is recommended to use something to make sure the systems, all your systems are configured properly and they are up to date and they are consistent. Default software installation may start up a new service or open up a port that are not needed and may lead to unintentional access to the system. The goal is to disable unnecessary services. Recommended control is to audit the services on the systems regularly. So if you're using a host that does not have a firewall and it is running service like FTP, this can expose your system. So you may have that FTP service open for entire internet, although only one person requires to use that service from one machine. So in that case, what you can do is open the service or open the FTP service only for that one particular IP rather than the whole internet. Set user ID and set group ID are Linux file permission. They allow certain users to run specific programs with elevated privileges. The permission that are set on the file determine what users can read, write, or execute the file. Sometimes system installers may install set UID, set GID programs that are not needed, which may introduce vulnerabilities. So the set GID or set UID programs that are not needed should be disabled, and needed ones should also be evaluated to see if they are vulnerable. Services designed to work within a particular trust boundary sometimes have vulnerabilities, which can be exploited across those boundaries. So where there is an access where there is allowed access across trust boundaries, you need to use a strong authentication mechanism, something like SSH authentication, in order to authenticate that host or that user. So, for example, if you are using a test server that is on the same network as the production server, and they both share the same privilege, what can happen is if one of them gets compromised, that can also lead to unauthorized access onto the other one. So we need to be careful of those things. Point number 3.7. So an attackers, they always look or monitor the network for clear text authentication credentials. So it is important to protect them by using strong authentication mechanism. As I suggested, as I mentioned previously, SSH keys. When passwords are transmitted across the network, they should be encrypted. Apart from that, they should also be encrypted while at rest using strong hashing mechanism. So users that have privilege access can be targeted by an attacker to gain elevated privilege on the system. So the requirement for such users is to have better security than the other normal users. They should always use multi-factor authentication wherever possible. Only need-based privilege access should be provided. That is, not everyone should be given privilege access on a system. A remote root to access should not be allowed across trust boundaries. Root passwords should be changed once the staff who knew root password, they leave or they change roles. Trust relationship that cross trust boundary can be exploited by an attacker from one side to gain unauthorized access to the other side. Hence, the machine where there is a trust relationship must be considered within the same trust boundary, and they have to be protected properly. NFS stands for Network File System. So they have limited authentication capabilities. Therefore, NFS service should be protected from unauthorized host access. This can be done by limiting NFS service to the local network of cluster. They should be mounted as read-only without any executive permissions or execution options. They should also be mounted to refuse requests from any unprivileged source ports. One last point, 3.11 states that attacker can also try to tamper with local log files to hide their access or the path through which they entered your system. So this makes it necessary to have a centralized server where all files can be exported, and analysis should be performed on this data to look for anything unusual. Also, you should try to keep at least an year worth of data handy in case you need to go back and maybe analyze an incident that had happened in the past. Also, the backup of your centralized server. It's important to keep a backup of your centralized server. So this is network security that again I would like you guys to go through on your own and put in your remarks, whether if you are mitigating them, not mitigating them, partially mitigating them, or you have accepted the risks. Same for monitoring and logging section. So once you are done, once you have gone through this IT security self-evaluation sheet, you will have a list of A's and list of C's. So count them out and see how many risks you are accepting, how many risks you are mitigating, how many you are not mitigating, and how many you are working on. What did you get? Are you accepting a lot of risks, or or are you mitigating most of them, or not mitigating them at all? Moving on to our OSCRP section, risks to science mission. OSCRP is a product of Trusted CI. It was developed by a group of individuals working for Trusted CI. It stands for Open Science Cyber Risk Profile. So what OSCRP does is it takes an asset impact oriented approach. We create an asset inventory for the project that we are working on. Then we examine the concerns and consequences on that asset. So after that, what we do is for each relevant concern, we try to determine the avenues of attack. Avenues of attack are the means by which an asset can be impacted. So what we do is we just take all the assets that we have in that project, and then we try to find out what harm can befall the assets. And from there, we try to find out the avenues of attack. So assets here could be computing systems, data storage system, or networking equipment, scientific equipments like microscope, telescope, or a particle accelerator. Asset could also be your staff, the suite of softwares that you might have developed, or you are getting some of the softwares from third party and other tools. So what we would like to do here is I would ask you guys to pick an asset that is very critical to your project, and then think about what concerns do you have on that asset, and what could be the consequences if the concern are realized, and what could also be the avenues of attack. In next few slides, we will be going through some of the examples ourselves so that you guys are aware how can we go ahead and do a OSCRP on a project, on an asset or a project. Yes. So here the asset is generated or collected public data. Concern here is data becomes inaccessible or the data is lost. The consequence of inaccessible or lost data could be twofold. If the data needs to be reproduced, then it would lead to lost effort, that is, loss of human hours. If the data is non-reproducible, then science time and opportunities would be lost. Another concern here is corrupted data, consequence of which would be incorrect science results. Then we also figure out or determine the avenues of attack, which here is issues with sensor equipment or scientific equipment like telescope or microscope. Or the data itself could not be produced due to issues with softwares, or the data, we are not able to produce the data because there is some issue with the storage system. Or if the data is produced, the data that is produced is incorrect or corrupted. So those are our avenues of attack here. So moving on to another asset, another example, user portal. User portal is an asset that is used by users to access some resources. So concern for this are portal unavailable, and portal or the portal is not working as expected. Consequence here is based on the type of data. There are different types of data like public data, non-public data, internal data, accounting information. So based on the type, the consequences could be different. Like sensitive and medical data will have higher consequences because medical data, they fall under HIPAA. They need to be HIPAA compliant. Avenues of attack here are equipment damage or DOS, denial of service attack on the portal. What it would do is it will make the portal service unavailable for legitimate users by creating a request bottleneck at the portal. So the legit users won't be able to access the portal because there are hundreds of thousands of requests that is being sent to the portal from illegitimate sources. Another avenue of attack would be misconfiguration of the service portal itself. The portal is not configured properly. That could lead to issues. or a malicious insider at the service provider making changes to the portal, or an unauthorized user making changes that would lead to portal not performing as expected. As you can see in this diagram, everything is kind of interconnected. One avenue of attack is connected to a portal unavailable. Then again, that is also connected to portal not performing as expected. So this is our OSCRP diagram. Let's take a look at a couple of more assets. So asset here is project budget. Concern here is lost finances. Consequences would be this would lead to loss in science time, reputation could be damaged. Competitors can get ahead in the race by publishing their findings first. It could also lead to legal actions. Avenues of attack here would be issues with staff, which falls under intangible and human assets. Again, we have denial of service or distributed denial of service, which could affect the billable usage. You will not be able to use the service provider's service if someone does denial of service or distributed denial of service. There could also be contract issues like licensing and consulting. There could also be issues with facilities assets, as you will lose access to infrastructure that are needed to support your project. And if you do not have the infrastructure to support your project, you won't be able to, you won't be able to work on your project. You won't be able to do anything. Let's take a look at another asset here, which is project reputation. So the concern here is community will start questioning if you are secure enough. There could be unwanted media attention. The projects that you collaborate with might lose trust. And the consequences here is community will stop using your project or your product altogether. And in order to get around the media attention, you might have to reallocate some of your resources to deal with media attention. That will also lead to losing in human hours, loss of human hours. Science time could be lost if the projects stop collaborating with your project. Avenues of attack here would be the response to the incident. If they are not well managed, it could be problematic. If an incident or security incident occurs, they have to be communicated well to the public. When an attack happens, the quickness of a response to the public can affect the stock price of a publicly traded company in a positive way. If company is under attack or has been attacked and they do not reveal that they had been attacked, and later some agency, some regulatory body, if they find out that they have been attacked, then that could lead to even more fines and other types of legal actions. Issues with data assets like public data, internal data, or sensitive data can also be avenues of attack. If your data falls under HIPAA, then you need to be HIPAA compliant if you are dealing with any such data, if you are dealing with medical data. Another avenue of attack could be personal or staff issues. If your website is hacked and then you go around and build a new website but did not upgrade or patch it, then it can be hacked again, which again harms your reputation. It does no good to your reputation getting hacked again and again. That could be recurring incident. Not fixing your software vulnerability, not putting your gateway in a very robust data center, which does not have a good security practice, can also be a problem. Not doing backups properly, storing clear text passwords, not dealing with injection problems are some of the other avenues of attack. So, and all these avenues of attack can harm the project reputation. So this particular slide, it lists out the example of assets that are out there. For example, under data, you have public data, embargo data, internal data, you have documentation, accounting, etc. For facilities, you have power and climate control, your HVAC systems, physical access control, who is able to get into the building, who is not, such kind of controls. That also is one of the asset. Your systems like network equipments, file storage, website, database, user portal, desktop, laptops, mobile devices, all these are your assets. Then your software, whether it's external or internal, that is also an asset. Then you also have intangible or human assets in the form of your staff and the reputation itself, reputation of your organization, reputation of your project. So at last, these are some of the cybersecurity resources that you can check out. The guide to developing cybersecurity program is set to be replaced by a framework. So once that is done, maybe I will update my slides. As a web application, as a gateway, you should definitely look at OWASP top 10. This gives you a list of top 10 web application related vulnerability that could affect your system. So look at them to verify if you are addressing some of these vulnerabilities or if you're addressing all of them, which is very good. Also, CIS Top 20, it provides you a list of general IT related risks for your organization. So you can also take a look at that. So that'd be all for today. Thank you everyone for listening to me, and let me know if you have any questions or if you want to do a cybersecurity engagement with us. And for that, you have my email ID. You can send me an email or you can contact Triastorm, who will get in touch with me and we can start an engagement. Thank you everyone again. Thanks. Bye.